Hello, I'm Tammy Eggert. I'm the Program Director for the Civic Education Center, and today I'm here with Dr. Stephen Morris, and we're going to talk about civic values and a beloved community. So welcome, Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Tammy. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, well, why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Cool. I have been involved in education since I was a kid, being kicked out of every school in my hometown, and then getting my doctorate degree in education, leadership, serving as a principal and a teacher in public and private schools, realizing that education really is the key to building this sense of reflective patriots that we need in our country.
Great. Well, today we're going to talk about beloved community because this guy talks about it quite often, and he is an expert in the term beloved community. So why don't we start off by explaining what does that mean?
Beloved community comes from a term that started with Josiah Royce, and there's a auditorium named after him at Fresno Unified at Fresno High, who thought that love would be the answer to humanity's racist decisions that were coming out in the early 1900s about determining intelligence, about the wars that were constantly being fought. He was a scientist and a philosopher, and no one really took him serious except an African-American by the name of Howard Thurman, who took that concept and began applying it to what Jesus said in the Gospels and talking about how that could change the world. His student was Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. died with this book in his hand, that on his person, that talked about the beloved community. And there it's talking about the power of love to change enemies into friends. It talks about the power of restoration and reconciliation. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. says the end result or the outcome of the beloved community is about restoration and reconciliation. When so many wrongs have been done against people, against even us as individuals, it's easy to put up barriers and never want to deal with that person again. But when we live in community and society, we must learn how to live together. And these principles of a beloved community that Martin Luther King Jr. espoused in the 50s and 60s and early 70s really became the hallmark of nonviolent change for our civil rights movement in this country. He understood and experienced the evils that were committed against him and against African Americans at that time, seeking and searching for equality in this country. But he warned over and over again that retaliation only creates fears, and those fears create greater retaliation on both sides. And so there is no community built. There's only war and strife until one is ultimately destroyed or decimated. King understood this very well. He even did an eloquent explanation of the rise of Black power in America and how it violates some of the core principles of the beloved community. And yet he understood that when people are oppressed, they naturally seek for power, and the oppressor wants to keep them from gaining that same power. But King's beloved community was about shared power, a shared sense of equality, where all people, regardless of their ethnic heritage or their racial background or their financial status, could come together and live in this nation. He believed that it was just as much responsibility of the poor and the rich to live together, to end poverty, to create self-discipline, and allow communities to flourish together. He believed that racial differences, black, white, red, yellow, as they used to say, and those terms are archaic today, shouldn't divide people, but create more of a unique mosaic for people to come together. His explanation that people like to talk about is for Black people and white people could come and sit together at the same table. But we have to understand that that table was a dinner table where equality existed, and the discussion of the food that would be eaten would be talked equally among all the partners involved, and that there would be manners involved as we passed food and as we shared food. There was much more to that analogy than most people even begin to think about. It's important to think about that a beloved community talks about discipline. It talks about self-discipline. It talks about looking at the needs of the community, finding common ground, and not getting locked up in your own sense of worth and power. That's his history of the beloved community.
Wow. And you said that equality was very, very important in the respect of a beloved community. And I remember equality was also one of the civic values that our founding fathers identified, along with democracy. Help me remember all of them.
Liberty. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, equality, and justice were some of our early civic values that are espoused in the Declaration of Independence and Constitution.
Yeah, can you connect those civic values with beloved community for us?
Absolutely. I mean, let's take the idea of justice. And most people think where there is love that it's mamby-pamby and you don't really deal with tough issues. But love means you deal with the tough issues. It means love applied rightly is justice lived out. Justice without love is bitterness and creates opposition. The two have to go hand in hand. If you don't have justice with love, then a community will not feel the sense that we are a community. You have one oppressing another. Mm-hmm. The idea of equality is so critical in that, and equality in the sense of our human nature, our human being, the worth of every person on this earth has to be valued. And that means that we're going to listen to one another. We don't have to agree with each other. No, I mean, we're too different to agree. But that we have to agree that you have something valuable enough in and of yourself for me to hear. Our ideas of equality and understanding that all of us must work together were the hallmark of our national motto, E pluribus unum, which talks about out of many, we become one. It talks about diversity, talks about the diversity of the original 13 colonies. Some of them had slaves and some didn't. And those that didn't have slaves didn't necessarily like those that had slaves. It talked about religious differences between the Quakers and the Catholics and, the Baptists and the Methodists and the Presbyterians. They fought each other. They taxed each other. And yet they had to come together to defeat the largest military power on the face of the earth. Hmm. And if they didn't come together, if they didn't put aside their differences and consider each other equal, they would not have been able to engage in that skirmish. Britain was already engaged in a world war with France and with Spain in the Philippines, around India. And so for them to come and wipe out America and wipe it out quickly was their goal. But because these colonies came together and offered resistance, it delayed Britain using its military forces elsewhere in the world. Britain gave up fighting here because these colonies came together as a sense of equity and fought together, even though they still had their differences, to end tyranny and create the idea of liberation and equality for all. In our nation's very founding, we have the history of what people like to talk about in ethnic studies. The three principles are opposition, resistance, and liberation. That's our nation's history. Mm. But we have a tendency, or those that teach ethnic studies have a tendency to want to pull that away from America's history. It's our duty as citizens to realize when our country is wrong, to resist and to create opposition, to create change. Now, that opposition doesn't have to be in violent protest. Violent protest, like Dr. King likes to say, only creates more violence. So we don't want to create more violence. We want to create lasting change. To create lasting change, we have to begin to realize that we need to share power together, right? And together respect each other as human beings, as different as we are, to hear the beauty in that differences, to create the change. It never ceases to amaze me that NASA, the untold story about our space launch, was held together with African-American women in math who were discriminated against, that prevented us from beating Russians to launching the first satellite. But when they came together in the 60s, we had this tremendous, robust space program that got us into space and got us to the moon before anybody else could. There is diversity of intelligence and wisdom and knowledge in this nation. Every culture on the face of the earth is represented here. That's the collective wisdom and knowledge of every culture. That only makes us stronger. If we really live by e pluribus unum and become reflective patriots and say when our country is not listening to one part of that, the opposition we form is through dialogue. And we have these conversations about where our values are failing. And then we create the resistance by saying, we're going to vote for someone that supports us in this. We don't have to always jump into violence and destroy property and destroy lives and think that we're getting people to believe in what our cause. They're not. Our cause gets lost in the violence. But when we fight, as this nation did, and created a unity out of diversity, we win the war. And we will always win the war.
Wow, that's such a powerful message. What are some tangible ways students can practice beloved community with using our American civic values?
I love that. And the Civic Education Center, if you need help with that, call us and call Tammy. She's really good at this, right? But if you need guidance in this, it should be done. Understanding the practices and principles of transformative social emotional learning, understanding restorative practices are hallmarks to practicing U.S. civic values. We cannot live in a pluralistic democracy unless we learn how to govern our own emotions and get along with each other. And those philosophies, those theories teach you that. And that's what we've incorporated into our civic-based learning program, those very practices to allow students the opportunity to engage with one another, not to avoid one another, but to engage. And so to have the training, right, and to understand the backdrop, the principles, the philosophies, the paradigm that drives it all is critical for you to begin to host one of these in your class. Because if you get locked up in your own bias as a teacher, in your own perspective as an adult, you can shut down student voice completely or encourage one group of students over another and give a false impression about what public education's role in building future reflective patriots is all about.
So we spoke about beloved community and civic values, but I've heard this other term called reflective patriotism. Can you explain what that is and how does it fit within your work?
Why, it's a powerful thing that we didn't develop. I mean, Paulo Freire and others on critical thinking have put this into place. iCivics and other organizations have talked about this idea of how do we look at all the mistakes that have happened in our country's history and yet still appreciate the values that created the country. And so the concept of critically examining our values and the application of those values came about in a term that we call reflective patriotism. A reflective patriot is someone who looks back at the decimation of Native American tribes, slavery, women not having the right to vote, child labor laws, unrealistic child labor laws, unrealistic pollution of our lands and our communities. And we say, are these values something that we believe in as Americans? If not, how do we make these values happen and real? That's what a reflective patriot is. It's a person that loves their country enough to say it's wrong and loves their country enough to say, let's fix it together. I think it's not about flag waving, although that can be a part of it, but it's not about ignoring what's really happening and ignoring the truth. It's owning the truth and doing something about it with the knowledge that we have corporately, being as diverse as we are in our pluralistic democracy to create the change in the country we want. That's what a reflective patriot is. And that's what we do at the Civic Education Center. We give our students the skills, the tools to practice critical thinking when it comes to the application of these values that we hold so dear, that all are created equal and all are entitled to rights that cannot be taken away by government, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness, our founders wanted us to know, is the pursuit of virtue, the pursuit of a quality of life that will make us happy and make our communities happy. We have to be the guardians of that and teach our students the skills to look at, honestly look at, critically look at how we've applied those values, and then create, through common agreement, multiple perspective research, deliberative dialogue, and understanding that we can all agree on that these values, that's what makes us Americans and reflective patriots.
Yeah, and sometimes when we see that our values are not being lived up to today, and you talked about the passion and, especially when it's paired with some of our experiences and our biases, we could get really emotional over it. So, we were talking about beloved community, and when you look at news today, a lot of times people will take that passion and it's definitely not a beloved community.
No,
so how do you, and if you could speak to like our students and our young people today, how, like, if you could give them advice, how could they take something that they see is not being lived up to today and they get very angry over it, but yet you want to have them move forward towards a beloved community? How do they do that?
Yeah, that's really good. I'm reminded of a reporter that we had speak to our students in Sacramento from a well-known newspaper that was talking about reporting as a sense of advocacy and only getting one side of the story. Listen, we believe in advocacy, but we believe in a beloved community that advocacy comes after you do your homework, after you understand the issues from multiple perspectives, after you understand what your biases are and that you're willing to engage in deliberative dialogue with others, then you become a reporter and an advocate. And when you report the story, you report all sides of it. Don't limit yourself to one limited idea that creates bias and dismisses half the population. If you really want to create unity and controversy, understand all the sides of it and give all sides of it a fair hearing. So students, your passion is wonderful. We love it. Adults have that passion too. But sometimes we end up hijacking your passion for our issues. Don't let us do that to you. Do your research. Take time to do your homework. Look at those multiple perspectives before you decide to become an advocate of something that you really don't know anything about. Do that research. Get involved in it. Understand you have community partners who can help you, but that comes after you really understand the issues involved in it. That's what creates the beloved community. When we can really honestly understand the perspectives that others have, and we have a genuine conversation about it, then we can talk about common sense change. But until then, it's all going to be one-sided, and it's all going to be debate-oriented and passion-filled without the results that we want in a beloved community, which is reconciliation and restoration.
So in short, are you saying that we need to see it from the other side, even if we don't agree with them?
I'm saying you need to see it from multiple sides, even if you don't agree with them. That's all the more important. And I've had to learn that so many times myself, about understanding others' perspectives have weight and value. It's when people speak their lived experience, we don't dismiss it, but we also understand it's only part of the picture. So I got to have that part of the picture to understand the whole thing. So all our lived experiences together give us the whole picture and not just part of it.
Yeah, but we don't have to agree with them. We just
absolutely
need to
not.
see their
Absolutely not.
side. Does it make, in a sense, doesn't it make our side a little bit more powerful because now, or credible, not powerful, credible because now we're seeing it from both sides?
It makes it very credible when we can see it from all sides.
All sides.
Because I think the issue comes in that, as you said, that it's easy to shut down one side or another or take power over another. But when you begin to appreciate the lived experience of everyone and their truth that makes the whole picture, then you're willing to say, what am I not hearing with what I know? What am I missing? What do you have that I need to make me hear better? And that's when we then talk about our common solutions. Not before, Before, they're not common. They're argumentative solutions, debates. But when we talk like this, we can say, oh, yeah, I agree all kids should be educated. Yeah, we have that. Now we talk about what's some of the important things kids should know in school. Well, they should know reading. They should know math. Do they need to know how to get along with people in the world? Well, yeah, I can agree with that. So now we have an agreement that civics becomes important along with the other issues. And then we further talk like that, starting at a point where we agree to find out how we can create something that works for the best of all of us.
Is this where the civic values come into play?
Those where the civic values live. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you learned a little bit more about beloved community and civic values and reflective patriotism.
Yes.
Reflective patriotism. If you have any questions on any of these or you want to learn more, I will leave the website address and the phone number of the Civic Education Center down below. And we feel free to reach out anytime to get to get more information.
Yes.
Do you have any ending comments or want to send a message to our viewers?
I think two things. One, I have a book coming out called Dare to Hope that will be ready. Dare to Hope, passing the torch from protest to promise, directed towards teachers and young people, that I think will talk about some of the very things that we talked about here. And Dr. John Minkler, our co-founder, has also written a book called Civic Intelligence. It really looks at the heart of why we believe what we believe. I think those two books together will be a great resource for any teacher, any school, any library, for students and adults to read, to understand this complex thing of living in a pluralistic society as reflective patriots.
If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us. And as always, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.